Hi, good evening, and welcome back to another episode from the SamosaChai.net series. My name is Rashmita, and I'm the event planner for Microsoft Reactor India. Today, I'm here joined by our very own host, Vivek and Aditya. Hey, hi, Vivek. Hi, Aditya.
Oh,
Hey Rashmita. Hey
So,
Aditya.
yes. Okay, so before I hand over the floor to both of them, I would request you all to read our code of conduct. We are all here to learn together, so please be respectful of other people's views, understanding of differences, being kind and considerate in the way you engage. The chat section is open throughout, and we do encourage you all to participate. Our speaker will answer all your questions during the session, so please feel free to drop all your questions in the chat section. With this, thank you all and enjoy your session. Over to you.
Thank you Rashmita. Hey Aditya, how are you?
hi Vivek, all good, all good. It's
I, ca- I, ca-
definitely great to be here with everyone.
I can see that you have picked up my background. That's usually my background in office,
Yeah,
and
no, I
I
was
usually
definitely
have
very
people walking by.
inspired. Yeah.
That's very good. And we are back on one more show, SummerSouthside.net. And people who have joined, just let us know in the chat from where you're joining. Um, do you have samosas with you? Let me know. Let me know. So that will be really cool to know as well. Right?
I'm
Cool.
actually worried about
So
knowing that because I might get a little hungry in the middle. That's
you
yeah.
I mean, the tradition has been that myself and Desh, when we just before starting this show, we usually have tea or samosa before we come, or
Wonderful.
some snacks before we come to this show. Because
Yeah.
sometimes because it's samosa chaito show, we keep talking and we don't know how much time it takes, right? So it's not always
Mhm.
timed like 1 hour we'll go back. No, it's always like we enjoy talking on those tech. So cool. So what are we doing today, Aditya? I know that we're going to build an app, um, and it's going to be amazing app, and then we are going to use .NET, of course, because we are on
Absolutely.
SamosaChai.NET show, and then we're going to try something new today, which is a new tool, which is the Backend-as-a-Service tool, which is Appwrite. So
Yeah.
I'm here to learn all of these things because I have not used backend as a service tool for a long time. So I hope this is going to be interesting for me, new learning for me too as well. So over to you, Aditya. Uh, let's get started.
For sure. Absolutely. I think that way it's going to be quite an interesting session because minimal APIs for sure is a tool that I've been using more and more lately. Um, And I will say I came from the controller style of APIs that .NET always supported. That was my comfort zone. So for me, to switch over it took some amount of effort in the sense that I had to make up my mind to actually go towards this rather than go back to my regular comfortable controller style. But minimal APIs is actually a wonderful, wonderful addition to .NET. It's
Yeah.
really substantially improved the developer experience of building APIs. And in fact, for anyone here who's worked across different languages and different frameworks, if you've worked with Node.js to create Express-like APIs, or if you've worked with Flask, if you're a Python developer, you've worked with Flask to create APIs, you're going to enjoy minimal APIs developer experience for sure. So we're going to try that out today. We're going to try and understand what minimal APIs are, how they can be built, and then actually go out and build our first little CRUD API with minimal APIs using a backend as a service platform called Appwrite. So I hope it's going to be fun. I hope it's going to be interesting, something
Yep.
new to try out for sure.
Lot of questions coming your way. So brace yourself.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, in the meantime, I think what we can do is I'll just go ahead and I will share my screen in just a second. Let me just get my screen up.
Uh, you have shared? Oh,
I have
let
shared it now.
let me add that to the screen.
So
Oh,
I'm just gonna share my full screen in the meantime because we're gonna try working with Visual Studio. There's gonna be some of my browser just to look at Appwrite and so on as well. We'll do a few different things there. So is there a concern with audio quality? Are you not able to hear clearly, or
I can hear you. Can you hear me? Well,
I can hear you properly as well, Vivek. I think we've just
okay.
gotten a comment from the chat section.
No worries. I can hear you and you can hear me well. We'll just go ahead and I hope it will get better,
Yeah,
Mo. Just give us some time. I think probably it's
could be an
taking some
internet
time.
connection issue.
Yeah, could be.
All right, so I'm gonna go ahead. This one we're gonna just jump into code as well, just to see and try it out. I think that's always a good thing to do. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna start up Visual Studio, and we will create a new
Um,
project.
can you zoom or increase the font a
So I
little?
think this particular window of Visual Studio does not allow much zooming.
Okay.
Yeah,
So you're
like I
creating a
can do that once
project.
we're in the editor. But in
No
the
worries.
meantime, yes, that's what I'm doing. I am creating a project. So I'm gonna go ahead.
Creating a
I'll
project
search
with
up.
web API. So web API,
Yeah.
which is the minimal API.
Yeah. So
Okay.
with web APIs, it gives you an option to either create controller based or
Mm-hmm.
um, minimal APIs. Like it gives you the
Mm,
option.
got it.
And so this template here, it will scaffold and create a project template for any REST based ASP.NET Core Web API. So I'm
Got
gonna
it.
go ahead. I'm gonna select this. We'll call it samosa chai, right? And I'm gonna change the location from here to just my desktop.
Okay.
We'll call this samosa chai minimal because I was checking my directories and I might have a couple of other samosa chai projects lying around. Solution name, it's a choice. You can place it within the same directory as your project. It's only a container for Visual Studio projects, so that's all right. You can choose whatever you prefer as you go forward with this. I'm going to go ahead select next. Now, as I do that, what it's going to do is it's going to give me an option for um, the different .NET versions that I have available on my device. And
Mm-hmm.
so I can select any of these here. I'm going to select .NET 7 for now. That's the one I'll keep. We don't need to set an authentication type, but if you have a project where you need to add Microsoft Identity Platform or Windows login, it's quite handy to have. We will configure this for HTTPS for sure. Right now, I'm not enabling Docker, but that's again a handy option. And this here is an important checkbox that we have. So using controllers, this will let you either decide whether you want a controller based API, which would be a very MVC style .NET API if you've ever
Mm-hmm.
had a chance to look at it before. If you uncheck this, it will create a minimal API for you, which as we will see, will show how it's substantially different from the controller style. And I will keep OpenAPI support selected because this will help generate a Swagger spec for this API from the get-go. So when you need to document your API, document all the different endpoints and so on, this is actually very, very handy to have.
Got it.
So on these settings, I'm going to go ahead and I'll create my project now.
Cool.
Now I think we're in a better position to zoom in. So what I'm going to do now is I'll just select my, yes, I have selected my code file and I hope my code is visible now.
Yeah, now it is good.
Perfect. So as you can see with this minimal API, what it's done is it's scaffolded a project for us where it's a firstly added the ASP.NET Core Web App Builder, which is used to build and generate the web app for us. It has, well, the var builder that we have, which is getting this ready. This is important. Along with that, line 8, we're going to see the app. Um, this here an instance is an instance of the web app builder. This here triggers this builder to build the application, and these two are standard across any minimal API you create. Now, just like other ASP.NET Core apps, we have the services container available with us, which lets us inject different dependencies into it. We've got a few dependencies here added because we selected OpenAPI support, which lets us use API Explorer to have any endpoint metadata, generate a Swagger specification, and here because it's always recommended to only generate a Swagger UI for development environments so that you don't end up overexposing information about the API to entities that you may not want to offer that to. We have this little block that um, only restricts Swagger UI generation and Swagger usage only to our development environment. And after that, we've got this little string array here. And here is the endpoint. It is generated for us by default. Now, if any of you worked with the controller style of APIs, you might remember that what it would do was in a very MVC like fashion, you would have a separate directory controllers. Within that, you would have an API name controller.cs file, which would have some annotations about the name of the controller, and you'd have a full-fledged class with different actions and so on. With minimal APIs, however, we now see a different developer experience where you directly map the endpoint and the HTTP function here to the app as it's being generated. And any code or any logic that you need to add, you can directly add here itself. Now, yes, this doesn't mean you can't separate logic if you want. You can still have services kept in separate directories and use dependency injection to inject them and consume them. That is very much valid. That does not go away. However, the idea here is to minimize the number of requirements and dependencies needed because with the controller based APIs, it could very well mean that you had a very large and bloated project structure. And minimal APIs that way becomes a very ideal solution for scenarios where you need smaller and smaller services, which is quite an important aspect of how cloud native applications have been going and growing. So here is
So
an example
Aditya,
of an endpoint we have.
so
Yeah.
Aditya, what you have done right now is basically you created a project, web API project
Yeah.
in Visual Studio, and this is a basic structure it gives, right? And for you to go back and
Yes.
make changes and build
Absolutely.
that
This is the
API
default.
default one.
Mhm. Mhm.
Got it. Perfect. So basically, you are converting this to build a to-do app today.
Yes, this is what I will be converting.
Perfect.
And just as any other dotted application, you can use records. You want to have any classes, you can do so as well. Uh, I'm still looking at the comments here, and any
We,
project older than 2 years. Well, I definitely see where you're coming from, right? And definitely a bit like the cloud native space is a very very modern technology space, and it's only now that we're making a lot more efforts to minimize um, the size and structure of every single service and project. That's been a more recent effort, although microservices as a concept has been around for a while, but we're definitely acting on it a lot more today.
yep.
So minimal
And
APIs is
we
definitely
will
a
come
major
to
enabler of that.
we will come to the backend as a service just in some
Absolutely.
time. So we'll come back to that. So I have that question to be asked. Cool.
Perfect.
Let's go ahead.
Perfect. So I'm gonna do a few things. I'm gonna for now remove a couple of like I'll try and simplify this whole example We'll just remove the weather forecast example for now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove all of this as well. And we'll just start renaming this for now, right? Like since we've thought about this idea and we know that we're going to work with um, to dos, right? So let's start renaming this in the meantime. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show a few basics and fundamentals of what minimal APIs can let you achieve. Right. So for this particular example, what we'll do here is, because this is a simple GET request, we're gonna return an OK response where we will send back a little string, hello, samosa, chai. Just as we've got the map get, we can also add map post. Uh, by the way, because it's an API, you can have the same endpoint, um, and you can separate functionality based on the kind of HTTP request you send. So if you've worked with APIs in the past, this should feel familiar. You don't have to keep renaming each endpoint just for the kind of function for the kind of HTTP request you want to send. We're gonna keep this one here as well. And by the way, we use a lambda here to create our logic. We have a lambda expression here, so you can, if you don't want to have a full code block, or if it's a single line, you can also actually just remove um, the braces and have that single line as well if you want. It's very much an option. In this case, we'll just add a couple of random numbers. I'm selecting two random numbers here. Now, we're going to use this later on, of course, as we test out these APIs, and we're going to add some other functionality here as well. But just for an example, I wanted to showcase a couple of features here. Actually, I'll tell you what, for MapGet, let's do one more thing. Sometimes, of course, with our endpoints, we want certain inputs as well, right? We want to make sure we're able to get those. So if, for example, I want to maybe add a name or a number. So let's add name here, right? Like suppose you send a request to this API with a name. What this is going to do here is we're going to keep string name. Just, because I've entered name here, we can now take this as a parameter. And we can actually use this as a variable for our API function here as well. So next, as you go ahead and as you use this, you can also just use that particular variable we're taking as an input. I'm going to do a couple of things here though. I'm going to add some metadata, like for example, the name we want for this particular function, which for now we're going to call get to do by ID, because I'll be reusing the same functions we've got here. And we've got with Open API that we want to keep here. Similarly, I'm going to quickly copy this because that makes life easier. And I'm going to call this add to do. Or rather, add to do is fine. So now that we've created a couple of these endpoints, and by the way, you can do the same thing for put requests, delete requests, and so on as well. Let's try and run this API first. Let's test this out. And then, of course, as we do that, we can go ahead and we can start understanding what Appwrite is and implementing that as well. Now, the moment I do that, I get a little notification from Visual Studio, a little box that says this project is configured to use SSL, and to avoid such warnings, we can choose to trust the self-signed certificate that ASP.NET Core has generated. Now, what this implies is that ASP.NET for developer environments offers you a self-signed certificate to so that you can use this API with SSL. This is especially important if you're enforcing HTTPS usage within your API, and that's in general. It just makes sure that traffic between your client and the app and the server is secure. So it's always a good practice to have to be enforcing that. When you deploy this on a production environment, you should be generating and configuring a certificate properly. For now, for your dev environment, this is good enough though. And like for example, if you deploy web apps to Azure on app service or so on, it actually does that for you. So now that this has um, configured my device to use this particular um, this particular certificate, I will go ahead and try out. But I seem to be getting a certificate invalidated in my browser. Wait, let me go ahead and look into that once. I think I might need to just stop and restart this once. There seems to be a little certificate configuration error on my device, and that's probably because of clashing dev environments. I'm gonna like just quickly for testing purposes remove HTTPS redirection from here. And I'm mainly doing this because I seem to be getting a certificate error in the meantime. But that's probably more a concern with my local device rather than uh, otherwise. So, just to check any other environments your device might have, you can also go ahead and visit the launch settings.json file within your properties. Right now, it mentions both HTTPS and HTTP here. Both of these endpoints are mentioned here. And because we're not enforcing HTTPS, I'm going to take the HTTP endpoint instead.
Got it.
So the moment I do that, I need to visit the Swagger endpoint on this particular API, and it looks like I might need to get it up and running once again. It configures all of these profiles for us in Visual Studio, so you can launch each of these specific profiles for you.
Perfect.
So as you can see, we now have the Swagger spec. We have all these different APIs that endpoints that we created, and we can test these out now. So when I send a regular request to this,
Can
let's
you
see,
zoom in a little bit? We can't see the message what it is throwing.
it doesn't seem to be sending back one, which is a little bit of a concern. Let me go ahead and just double check if I'm getting a similar concern with any of the other ones. All right. I think I might know what the error is, just to make sure that the API itself isn't a problem. I'm going to send it a regular GET request within my browser. All right. So I do have a feeling that what might fix this error, this is just a quick little hack that I tend to have,
Mm-hmm. So made it
is
more.
I go ahead and I create a proper object, because this is a
Yeah.
challenge I've seen in the past at times. Um, which might be a concern to just keep in mind for results.ok. That's something that I do need to double check. But let me go ahead and reload it once just to make sure everything's in order. And if this works, Means we'll be okay to test that out further. If this doesn't, then there's a bit of a challenge. Looks like it's not able to send a request. Let me add a breakpoint there once. Fortunately, it looks like I'm not able to get responses, so I might need a moment to figure this out.
Do you have a working code?
I should. I do have a sample that's ready for Appwrite. That is something I do have.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
if
let's
I'm
go with that.
not able to debug, I'll definitely do that. And I might need to debug things on my local system for now. After that.
Yeah. So let's go to this important discussion like
Yes. I'm
backend as a
gonna
service.
hop away to that. Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
That's a good idea.
we can fix this later
So
because we are live
that's
coding
a
it.
good
So
idea. That's a good point.
there's going to be something we have missed.
So as far as backend as a service platforms go, um, when we talk about um, building our own APIs, building our own backend applications, and so on, as we build larger and larger software, we end up working across. We end up building a wide range of services, right? Like we end up working with authentication, with databases, with storage, with webhooks, and there are a variety of different services we end up working on and building and using. Now, if we really think about um, backend, these different backend services we work with, how many different projects would you actually end up having to repeat the same work over and over and over again, right? You're probably implementing the same kind of authentication, whether it's chart based, whether it's with OAuth, but you are using these and consuming these in your applications. With the database, how many different times are you setting up your database again and again and again, right? So the idea of a backend as a service platform is to have a pre-built set of APIs and services that you can simply consume and um, you know you can directly take these, implement these in your applications, whether it's for client-side applications, whether it's for server-side applications. So one such um, backend as a service platform is called Appwrite. And what Appwrite it's an open source backend as a service platform. You can find the GitHub for Appwrite here as well. It's all the entire code base is available for anyone to look at, to try out, to test, and to contribute to. Now, for Appwrite, you could self-host it. It is delivered via a set of Docker-based services, or Appwrite is also currently running their cloud public beta, which means that you now have access to a cloud platform that you could work with and you could build on. So, as far as Appwrite goes, we've got all the documentation here. It's a great resource to get started with Appwrite. And aside from different client side platforms and SDKs, we also have a set of server SDKs available here. And one of the more recent ones is .NET. So for the SDK listing within the documentation, there is a dedicated page that you can look at. And this .NET SDK that we have, it's currently a server-side SDK that is delivered via NuGet. So you could use this in any .NET-based API that you were working with or so on. So
Aditya, can you just
the
share the
simple way
link
to use
in?
this is using the .NET CLI. I will share this link here in the chat with you because I think with StreamYard I might not be able to directly share links
Yeah, you share it to me.
myself.
I'll share. Yeah,
I've shared it here.
yeah.
So this is and this targets new .NET Standard 2.0. So you can use it across a wide range of .NET versions, whether it's .NET 5, whether it's .NET 6, 7, 3.1 framework. It ends up supporting a very wide range of .NET versions. So that way it's quite handy to work with. So what I'm going to do now is I actually have an example application ready on my GitHub that I will also be sharing a link for, that I will do a code walkthrough for, simply because I'm facing some challenges on my local device at the moment. Um, I'm going to share this repository here. There we go. And so this here features a CRUD API that, and it has all the steps you need to set it up, which we're going to follow along, right? So after we clone this repository, we're going to follow along with these steps and try it out as well. So it's going to show you how to sign up for Appwrite. It's going to show you how to set up an API key, set up the database, um, and then it features a minimal API that we have that you can use for your application. So what I'm going to go ahead and do next is I'll go and we can actually directly run this on code spaces. Code spaces should be good to work with. Hopefully that should mitigate some of my local device challenges as well.
And that is the reason we have CoSpace.
Exactly, right? Like if it doesn't work on my system,
Yeah, it's
we've got systems to work on now. I like remote code environments for that purpose. It's always handy to work with them.
I don't want to install anything on my laptop anymore. When I
Yeah, no,
it's
it
all it's all on
turns
the
into such a
it's all
hassle
on
at
the cloud.
times. Exactly. So the simple way to get, like, with Appwrite, at least for Appwrite Cloud, the simple way to start with using that is just to click on sign up here. And it's going to take you to our Appwrite Cloud page. Now that logs me in because I have an account, but you can, if I'll just sign out quickly and show this once. You'll either get, you'll go to a sign up page. You can either sign up using your email address, or we have sign up with GitHub as well. So you can directly sign in with your GitHub account if you'd like to do that. And I'm going to shift to my personal organization. You can have multiple organizations on Appwrite Cloud at the moment, or on Appwrite as well. With Appwrite Cloud, once though this becomes generally available, there are going to be limits on how many organizations you can have on your account based on the pricing tier you choose. The pricing has been released, and I can share a link with that after we've done discussing. Or if anyone wants to know more about that, you can always ping me on Twitter as well. My handle is just listed here. But in the meantime, on the beta at least, you have full freedom to use the services in any quantity you'd like. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to call this Samosa Chai. Now, as I do that,
Mhm.
it shows me a little dashboard here for my Appwrite project. And so for if you want to get started using Appwrite, the first thing you have to do is either add a client platform that we support, or for server-side applications, you either create a webhook or an API key. This API key here is what we're going to be creating. It's what we will be using to authenticate our Appwrite client on the server side API that we create. And I'll get to that in a minute, just after discussing the different services we have. Aside from this, once your API key is set, this page will change and it'll instead show you insights about um, your project instance that you have. So you'll end up seeing a slightly different dashboard here with um, user data across your instance. And other than that, we have our authentication service page, which will show you um, all the users you have. Right now, of course, I don't see any because I haven't had someone sign up through the SDK to this instance. But once you do that, you'll end up seeing different users here. You can also add them manually if you like. We also support teams, which helps you set permission groups for different services on Appwrite. This here will give you usage statistics about that. We also have some additional security features that let you select user limits, the length of each session, the number of limits, the number of maximum active sessions per user, And so for Appwrite Cloud, we do have some updates coming up very, very soon, which will add a new set of features to all of these services as well. Aside from that, we also have supported a plethora of OAuth 2 options. So if you're using Microsoft Authentication, for example, or you have GitHub Authentication, um, you can actually directly integrate this here by adding the app ID and app secret and just making sure you use the URI we have as the redirect URI on your GitHub app. But then you can directly implement all of these features into your application. Similarly, you can create a database. This I will be doing for sure, so I'll jump into this further in another couple of minutes or so. We've got cloud functions, which are the equivalent of serverless functions. And the way this works is that each function deployment runs as a little container uh, that we spin up as soon as a function is created and deployed on the platform. And we do offer a wide variety of runtimes for this as well. Cloud in its beta offers a smaller number, but we do have a larger number in general supported, including .NET. So if you're self-hosting Appwrite at the moment, you can use the .NET runtime on that. And as we go closer towards GA, we will start adding more and more runtimes to cloud as well. And we have storage, which works like storage buckets. So this is essentially this will work like an object storage for you. You can create a storage bucket and upload um, files such as images, documents, etc. on here as you'd like.
So
Now,
this is basically
yeah,
the structure of a backend as a service, right? So basically,
exactly.
you have the platform where you're building it. Uh, so basically, you could do a key API, or you can do a Apple app or an Android app. That is where you're
Yeah.
targeted, and you're building an API, or you're building a package. And then there is authentication, which is, again, it is part of the backend verification and other things. So that is simplified
Mhm.
for you. And then there is database, which is also simplified
Exactly.
for you. And then you add some
Mhm.
functions to handle a couple of things. And then there is storage for you to manage a couple of things which is coming from the data perspective, and you're uploading some of the data or reading some of the data. So basically,
Right.
that's the service which has been packaged
Exactly.
as a
All of these
service for
services,
people to
they
use.
all have a
Yeah.
generic set of APIs available for them. So databases, once, like for example, right, when we have a database, I'm gonna go ahead, I'll create a database called testdb. I'll set the ID here as testdb as well. Within that, we'll have a collection, which is the equivalent of a table here. Like
Yep.
if you're used to an SQL, if you're used to SQL, you'll recognize this as table. Um, we create a test collection. I'll keep the ID as test call for now. And I can create attributes here or so on. So once these are created, I only have to consume the database service. I don't need to write the database service entirely again. The functionalities for adding to the database and so on, they're all created and ready already. So I just need to consume them with the SDK that we have. And this can be especially very, very handy across different platforms, right? Like when you want to have a common database and a service for multiple platforms. Like for example, if you have a mobile app with maybe a BFF additionally, or you have a web app as well at the same time that you want to communicate with, having a common SDK with a similar sort of design pattern across each SDK to consume all of these services together becomes a very, very handy option. So all of these services are built and ready to consume. All you need to do is use either the SDK or the REST API or a GraphQL API to use and consume them. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'll create the attributes as recommended here, just to make sure we're following the same naming pattern. I will go ahead and create these here for us. Um, but once this is ready, the SDK means that this API is ready to use and good to go. Now we're gonna create two attributes here. Let me go ahead and close this one. So we're going to create two attributes here. The first one is description, This is going to be a string type attribute. Or if you're used to SQL, you know how you've got different columns in the database, right? This is essentially the same thing as a column in one of those. I'm going to set the size as 255 for now, and we'll set this as required because it's a mandatory field we have. Similarly, I will create is completed, which is a Boolean type, and we'll set that as required as well. So we could have documents that I add here for larger and larger collections, like where you have a lot of attributes. You could also set custom indexes for specific attributes. So if you need to search and sort based on a specific one, that becomes an option, and so on as well. Now that we have our collection ready, we also need an API key for us. So I'm going to go ahead and I will create an API key now. I will call this reactor. Now, as we look at this, you can add certain scopes to your API key, right? So, for example, if you want your API to be able to work on all services, you can directly select all, or you could select very, very specific services that you want to work with. Like, for example, the crucial ones in this particular app are just documents.read and documents.write, because they let us add documents to the collection we have, right? In general, for a production application, for an API key, always make sure you have only the specific necessary scopes selected, because if suppose your API key gets exposed, which is anyway a very, very bad scenario, but even otherwise, um, not selecting scopes you don't need, make sure that even by mistake, this API key cannot actually affect any other services across your instance.
This is an
So,
interesting feature because
yeah,
I feel there is a lot of control uh, while you're and it also solves a lot of things for developers, because if you have to do this without using any service, you'll have to code all of these things, right? Which is
yeah,
now which is a hassle, which is good for to use such kind of services.
it makes life
Yep.
easier for
Yep.
sure, for sure. Next thing, what I'm going to do is, now that we've got our API key and our database ready, I'm going to go ahead, go to this directory. So first thing we see here is appsettings.json, which we can use to, we can use this as our configuration for the application, right? We're going to get to this in a minute. I'm going to, in the meantime, quickly explain the app structure we have. Now, this app structure is going to look similar to what we had for the minimal API on our local device as well, if you saw earlier, unfortunately, which we ended up facing some challenges with as well. Um, we've again got our builder, as we saw. We've got our Swagger specification um, dependencies being injected to our services container. We are seeing our web app being built. Don't worry about those little error messages. It's just building out. The moment we run our next build, all that's going to be resolved. And here we're going to take these configuration files and so on, right? So once we've got all our necessary configuration fields ready with us, which I will add to the app settings.json later on, we're going to start seeing our first examples of the Appwrite SDK. Now, I feel at this point, we might just end up seeing some, this will make things easier to work with the SDK, once these errors go away. So I'm just going to build it once for us. The good thing is Codespaces comes with .NET ready, by the way.
Yep.
So we can just use .NET out of the box ready with us. So the moment I do that, because I had the Appwrite SDK ready within our project file here with us. I had Appwrite here already. It just restored this package. But otherwise, if you need to install it, you can check the NuGet page I showed earlier. We have a very simple command, .NET add package Appwrite, that you can use. It also has the Open API package ready, which was, as we looked at earlier in Visual Studio, if you select the Use Open API option, it's going to set that up for you beforehand. Swashbuckle is used to generate Swagger specifications. Going back to program.cs. So now that we go here, we are gonna first set up the Appwrite client. Now this is a part of the Appwrite SDK, which initializes an instance of the Appwrite client for us, and we need this client to communicate with any other services across our Appwrite instance. So the three things we need to do here is A, set the endpoint, B, set the project ID of this particular project that we created here, that was Samosa Chai, right? And C, we need to set the API key. Now, if you were working on the client side, you wouldn't need to set an API key here. You would just end up having a user log in and use their session. Because we do use sessions across accounts and sessions across a lot for the client side. But on the server side, that's not an option, right? We don't have a session being generated. So we can either use an API key. The other way is if, for example, you need user specific operations only, this would work in conjunction with the client app, but you could technically have a user log in using the Appwrite SDK on the client and generate a JWT, a JOT token from there. And so if you pass your JOT token, you could use that to authenticate your client as well. That is an option that Appwrite offers you. And in that case, it would act on the basis of that particular user only. In this case, the API key is general, it is not user specific. Next thing we do, we're going to initialize our database service for us. Now, just as we saw all of these different services across, right? We have a variety of services in the Appwrite SDK, like databases or storage or functions or so on. And so you can directly, once we initialize the databases service, we can start consuming these within our application here. So when I set up an endpoint, to-dos, and this endpoint here is just going to get all the to-dos for us. What we're going to do is we're going to use a function within the database service in this SDK called list documents. We need to pass the database ID and collection there, which is why they were two of the fields we initialized earlier from the configuration. But this will get all documents within the database service that we have. One thing to keep in mind here is that Appwrite's databases has pagination inbuilt. So at a time, it will only give you 20 up to 25 documents. You can, however, add queries to this particular call as well. And we do have a whole page in our documentation to show how you can how the structure for each of these queries goes. We do have some helpers within the SDK for this as well. But you can add queries to set a specific page number or a limit on how many how many documents you want in this response as well. So we do use this query list here a list of queries here we have, and that lets us implement pagination directly within this application as well. We do allow two kinds of pagination, by the way. One is offset, which has the common offset limit and sort of structure, and we also offer cursor pagination, which you can read more about in the documentation. Similarly, as we had list documents, we have getting document by ID, where we can use a different function in this particular service, get document, that lets us add the ID of a specific document. Now, this ID refers to the ID of a document, right? If you looked at the the collection I created and the attributes, I did not specifically add an ID in there. This is because each document in Appwrite as it's created has an automatic GUID based ID created by default. It is an option that is offered along with, as an inbuilt offering. So that is the specific ID that we have here. Next, we've got our create document feature, which is going to let us take an input and as a to do, of course, and we get to add this. Um, the good thing is that the SDK itself is going to serialize it for you, so that's not something you need to worry too much about. As mentioned, because Minimal APIs offers mapping functions for each kind of HTTP request, we've got the right HTTP requests mapped here. So we've got the post one for creation, we've got put for updation, we've got delete for the deletion, and we can take these IDs and so on as parameters here as well. So either you can have that as a separate query parameter, which would be the case if I remove ID from here, or you can leave it as a part of the endpoint as well. That is very much an option. And these can be both synchronous or asynchronous. So I'm using asynchronous functions because Appwrite's database service uses a lot of asynchronous functions, but specifically because there are HTTP calls set back there. But for minimal APIs in general, if you don't want to do that, you can also just have synchronous functions as well. That is very much an option offered. So now that we've looked at some of these functions and we've seen how Appwrite's SDK lets you build these out, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run this for us. The reason I've used the inbuilt debugger is because this means I can also set breakpoints or so on if I need to while we're testing. And the good thing is we can actually make this public and use these endpoints for us within our browser. One thing I have though just realized is that I did not set the configuration. So chances are you will see a Swagger spec as we go forward, but you might not actually be able to use it yet. Hmm. Wait, let me see if this is sending back an error. Let me just fix that configuration once for us. I'm just going to go ahead and do that and restart this function.
So while you do this, I feel it's pretty interesting because the first part is the minimal API helps you build APIs and it provides you with all the kinds of flexibility by solving all those intricacies which you don't require from routing and other things. And then you have Appwrite, which is as a backend as a service, which is which is basically giving you all kinds of structure and all kinds of help required for you to build it as a service, right? Basically, from authentication, from database, from storage, and other things which you usually use as a developer for an API, right? So, if you're building an API, so this is a powerful thing. If I mean, I'm sure if you're a startup, if you're watching this show, right? So basically, you will look at this as the way you go and build something really fast, because you have the a minimal
Speed
API
of
and then
development is
.NET
definitely a major factor there.
and also .NET. It's also fast, and it does provide you
Absolutely.
with so many packages, and it's faster than most of the programming languages. You do have a control over it, and then there is security in the programming language which you can leverage on top of that, and then minimal APIs and the API Appwrite, right? So it's combined. You
Yeah,
combine this, and it's a powerful tool, and it's faster to go live as well. So, yep, it's
for
a
sure.
it's an
For
interesting
sure.
one.
All right. I've set up the app settings here. So I'm going to go ahead and run this for us. The build is okay. We're going to see some errors. That's all right because some of these are just null referencing errors that I've left behind, which you can get from the configuration. Um, that's not something that you need to worry about too much. Also, one way to mitigate this is, you can have string dot empty here. That's going to mitigate this error. But that's an option. If you don't want to do that, you don't have to do that. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to build this up for us again. We're just building and running this from here. And hopefully it should work. And it looks like it just it, yeah, I lost my URL there for a second. So one thing that I do always need to check is if yeah, like this might be treating it as a production environment because you've got your function running internally, and then um, it's basically sending a port out to it, so there can be that's more of a code space aspect. But so another way to just check if things are working is if I send a
Don't
request to to-dos, but
don't forward it and just restart it
yeah.
and leave it and see what happens.
Hmm. 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 That's what I'm doing. I also have a feeling that what's happening is that I need to change port visibility to to public, because that might have been a little part of why we weren't getting this. But another way to test things out is by having a little REST API client, and we can just locally test it out that way as well. Now it looks like I can't unable to try Thunder client here either. The good thing though is I also have a deployed version of this that I can send a link to that people can test out. Unfortunately, this example's gone a little haywire. I'm just gonna double check it once, see, and make sure that it's all working okay, because ideally these things should be fine.
That's why live coding is hard.
Yes, that is true.
You can basically show the one
In
which
the
is
meantime,
already
though,
been
because we have
shipped.
an example ready that people can test out, this is something I deployed. It's the exact same example, by the way. It's the exact same example that's been deployed to Azure. So if someone does want to test it out, they can. I am sending a link here that, oh yeah, it's been shared in the chat. So this one
I shared it
already
to them.
probably has some inputs shared with us. So um, I'm just gonna add the to do as break things in live coding, because why not? We'll set that as true. And so as I send this out, you can see that it's sending back a response to us here, right?
Perfect.
There is a response we're getting. So that is the structure of how each document is set within Appwrite's database internally. And this way, what happens is that if you see, we have a document ID available here. We have our collection ID, our database, and these are going to look different because I have this set for a different project, which I can actually open up for us on Appwrite. So if I go back to personal, there is a different project that I have here where I've got this set up. So I did have a preset example just in case things went wrong, where some people just added a lot of string as an option. But you can see that we've got this to do created here. I definitely need to test this out more to see why things went wrong on this example. But in the meantime, at least, we do have a functional example here that is working. And similarly, so if I go back here and I visit a different document we have, I'm going to quickly copy this document ID and get it for us. So the way this request would go is, it would send a request to this particular endpoint here we have. And so as you can see, /todo/id, we've got this ID added here. Now, if for example, um, curly braces ID was not set as is. What would instead happen then would be that it would take it as a query parameter. So then you would instead have a question mark ID equal to instead of this ID being kept here. But so you can see that we get the description, we get the ID, the is completed field, we get the ID. We also get when it's created and when it's updated. Then what you'll see is an empty set of permissions. Now, the reason these permissions are empty here is because Appwrite allows two different types of permission models. You can have document level permissions, where each document has its own permission set. The other way that you can go about it is you can set permissions on a collection level. So this allows both methods of permissions available here for us.
I can set all these permissions via the SDK, right? I mean, directly through
Yes,
SDK.
you can. You absolutely can. So if I go back to the code example, and let me zoom in once. So if you look at create document, uh, it also lets you set permissions here manually. Now I haven't set any permissions here, but
Got it.
ideally, like the other thing you could do here is I could go ahead with permissions. I could initialize a new string list, and then I could go ahead and add different permissions for all of these functions. Or so either you could add them for each create, delete, um, read, update, or you could just add those for read and write. And write includes create, update, and delete. and
Right.
and so within that you could select role.any, which would allow it for any, or role.user, and then you can add the ID of the specific user. And so this way, there is a lot of granular control you get for the permissions for each specific service or document or resource on your Appwrite instance. So you can very much add these permissions for a document programmatically here as well. It is not mandatory to have to go uh, to the browser and have to do that.
Got it.
And yeah, so like if suppose I try the list documents, it sends back an entire list of these documents that we have. So it is fairly straightforward to build out these CRUD functionalities here for us and implement these. Um, it's very much doable for any um, backend developer here that we have who's working with .NET and with APIs, because even as a backend as a service platform is, of course, it helps client side developers a lot. This is going to still simplify developer experience for a lot of people. Like for the storage service, with a single command, you have um, a storage bucket. You have a service available to consume and work with storage buckets with chunked uploads and chunked downloads implemented out of the box. So that way,
So you
it
have
does
you
make life a lot easier.
you have storage for any cloud providers as well, or
So right now the
it's
way
just
this works is in Appwrite Cloud at least. Um, we basically use Docker storage. We use Docker volumes on the system itself. With
Mhm.
self-hosted, though, we do have a set of few other providers, and those can be connected through the environment file for this particular Applet instance that you have. So self-hosted supports that. For cloud, though, that's lesser of a problem because we have storage limitations specified based on pricing and so on,
Got
which
it.
isn't a problem in the public beta anyway.
Got it. Do you have a API to complete the task which you have created, the to do? I mean, I'm
Sorry.
like you did it. You did it. you did create a to-do task saying break code, so you have already done
I
that.
mean,
So
I think we tried that already.
so you should be able to complete it. The to-do
Yeah,
list should be
but
updated, and yeah, I've done it.
I'm definitely gonna do one thing. I'm gonna add a task for me here. Wait, where is the post? Yes, there
While
it
Aditya
is.
is adding
Um,
those things,
fix
uh,
my system.
yeah, so people can ask questions. We do have, basically, we are over time, by the way. So we do have at
Oh,
least
oh.
3 to 4 minutes. If we can take any questions, we can definitely
In the
take.
meantime,
Yeah.
I also have a blog to create this specific to do API, which was
Hmm.
definitely so. That is a blog that was written while building out this sample that we're seeing right now. This definitely works through and through, and that code works as well. I feel the challenge I'm seeing there is more of an environment issue, so I'm going to continue debugging that, and hopefully things will work out. Um, because this is definitely something I was not expecting.
So I've just posted that blog here, so that people can take a
Okay.
look at it. And yeah, people can go back and try this through the blog, the GitHub repo, which is there. You can I did share a couple of update on how you can integrate Appwrite with Azure. There is a wonderful blog written as well on our tech community, and you can go back and try all of these things. So that's
Yeah,
one of the thing which you can
absolutely.
do. But yeah,
So
but I
that
like this.
particular example, the one that you shared earlier from tech community, what that does is it shows how to build a server function. And by the way, this sample is working. Wait, I just tested it out via .NET Run instead, and I think that might just be um, a challenge here with this. But I just set this up, and it seems to be working. So
I mean, I did tell you, right,
that's more of
in
an
last.
environment challenge that we're facing,
Yeah.
because this is just from the code space itself that's running.
So
So
if you remember
all I
the
did was
last episode of Summer Satai, we were
yeah,
facing similar issue, and we just restarted the service,
I
and
remember.
phew, it is
Yeah,
working, right? That's the typical
yeah.
how
So the code
developers
itself that seems
fix
to
it.
be okay. Um, I think one thing, while questions come in, that I can do is I'll just hop back to that project we'd created earlier for Samosa Chai, and I'm gonna go ahead, go to the database so we can try this out and see as this works. So I'm gonna send a little post request. Um, I'm gonna have to set this one as false for now. It's going to be made true in a
We are
bit.
not having it. Yeah.
Not yet. So I'm gonna
Not yet.
execute
Correct.
this. It looks like I'm getting a response. Let me reload the collection. And yeah, we're getting a response. It's working. It's working. It was just we were not able to access the deployment
Yeah.
earlier, but it's that piece of code, the repository, that's all good to go. I remember having tested that one properly before making the blog, so I was very worried that the code was working. But
That happens.
it works. It
It
happens
happens.
all the time. It happens absolutely all the time.
But as I
A
was
couple of
telling
things that
you,
I just simultaneously try is
yeah,
while we
you want to
talk
try
about
the.
questions, if we see any. We
No,
try
no, we
put and
don't have
delete
any.
once because so I'm gonna keep this one. I'm gonna update this to drink water because I have actually been drinking water all around. I'm gonna keep that one as true. By the way, this has turned into a very health conscious session now, right? Eat samosa and chai false,
Yeah,
drink water true. We've got good messaging
uh,
going on here. So
I don't like it. I
it
want
sends.
samosa.
So as this particular piece, this function was set for a successful case, it sends back a no content, which is a 204, which is what we've gotten here. I am gonna reload this. We get a 204, which is great. I'm gonna resend this so we can make sure and see that we're getting back the entire list of fields. Right, we're getting back this collection as we saw earlier. And now to delete, which one should we delete, Vivek?
Drink water.
Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead. I'll add this ID here. We'll execute it, and we're getting an OK response. So there we go. It's all working,
Yep.
thankfully.
Yep. But in a good note, have samosa, chai, and also drink water. I mean, after some time.
Absolutely. I do have a
Correct.
samosa place here with just next to my WeWork now, so because I shifted offices, so I'm gonna go eat samosas after this. Yeah.
Cool. Cool. Yeah, and if anybody is watching this from especially from startup background and from a getting started as a developer and other things, this is a very interesting tool, right? So basically, we have .NET, which is very powerful, and then we have used minimal APIs, which is again helping you from building APIs. Very easy to build APIs with that, and then we have backend as a service, which is Appwrite, which is amazing. And then again, you can go back and deploy all of these things on Azure. And make use of all of these services to build an API and go fast to the market. So that's what it is all about, right? So cool. I think you're just over time. That is usual in somersetchai.net. We are always 15 minutes over time. We break code. We just sometimes code will not work for us, and we try to fix it. The reason
Happens all
behind
the
that
time.
is we always do this it's not planned, right? It's basically we just come here
Yeah.
and have a discussion and drive this. So that's the reason why it is called somersetchai.net. We are learning, and it's the time to learn, and we just spend time learning something new. Perfect. So thank you, Aditya, for coming on the show and sharing all of these new things with us. And thanks, Rasmita, for hosting us both. And thank you all people whoever has joined us. We are going to come up with some new things next month or probably this month itself. Where I'm looking at dates like 28th September, next month, 28th September, and we'll be coming back with something new to learn on somersetchai.net. Until then, take care, learn all of these things which we have shared with you. Thank you very much for joining in. See you all. See you, Aditya. Have some samosas. We'll catch up again.
Definitely.